I'm Kathleen. I'm a library assistant for San Antonio Public Libraries. Welcome back to the garden.
This one is recovering from the February freeze. And I do see that there are parts that will not recover. Those parts that have died, I will break away gently. But if they do not come off easily in my hand, then I will use a clipper or just leave it alone. However, the healthiest parts of any plant do benefit from the removal of that which is no longer growing. And this does help the plant save and redirect its energy so that it will recover and thrive. Let's take a quick tour of the garden. Let's start with the soil. Now, this garden patch was dug out a few years back, and I do turn it every year just after the winter. I recycled this wood and brick to enclose it. And as these plants do get taller, I plan to build up the soil. This garden patch began with lots of digging and weeding and the pulling out of old root and a lot of rock and stone. Plus plenty of weeds. Then many wheelbarrows full of simple dirt and peat moss mix combined with just enough fertilizer went on top of that. Well, that was a few years back. Right now you can see there is soil erosion, and I do constantly find myself weeding out the dried leaves the wind brings in or the rocks that hard rains manage to kick up. But then again, that is part of the fun and care of a garden, no matter how large or humble. Okay, well, let's begin with some Italian oregano and a fledgling rosemary next to some sage, chocolate chip mint, English thyme, and a cabbage that survived the winter. And, well, I let it hang out and thrive, and I think it's ready for the pot. Here we have some spinach, Malabar spinach. I have this tomato cage here because it does like to vine, but I think this is ready for the salad. And here we have some stevia, great for your sweet tooth, and some lavender. Basil, more basil, I can never have enough. Garlic chive, and the onion chive. It made the freeze as well, and, well, it's taken some time to come back. So is the lemon balm. Welcome back. Here we have the parsley, and there's the fennel right there, and more basil, and a very hardy Greek oregano. And of course, do encourage your pollinators and brighten up your garden with some flowers. This garden faces southeast, and so it does benefit from both full sun and partial shade. And so I'm rather strategic about where I'm planting. This fennel and the parsley and the basil, they appreciate at least 6 hours of sun and then some cooling shade. Whereas the rosemary we saw earlier prefers a drier soil and more sun. This little fellow, he lives here in the garden. He's gotten larger. Hey and howdy, little fellow. We live in peace together. I believe he helps with insects. And he's rather sporty with his colors and his patterns. Here we have the tomatoes. And I do like to keep some flowers nearby, always ready to brighten the garden up and welcome the pollinators. And there's a reason for that. Here you see that these cherry tomato plants, while they have produced what look like will be some bright, juicy cherry tomatoes, has come into more flower. And I do want to share with you a nifty trick to help this along. And that would be with the use of a small and simple tool. This right here. This Q-tip. Gently, I will do as the pollinators. As this flower has opened up, I gently take some of that, and I may not see it. I may not see it on the end of this Q-tip, but I know it's there. And gently, I can transfer it to yet another bloom on another plant nearby. Just like so. Now, I did this earlier in the season, and after doing so, while the plant was just a bit younger, came up with this and that. Well, whatever you do, let the plant show you what it needs. Here you see the tomato cage is leaning. That's because the plant has grown a bit larger. So, I will correct it and use some kite string as well to help support the limbs and the plant as it continues to grow. The winter freeze did set back my plans for some of my seedlings, but some seed was already present in the soil and came up pretty quickly after I turned the soil, such as this Malabar spinach. And it's prolific and it grows quickly. It is good in cooking and also in salads. I chop it up fine and I put it in cheese dips. Now, I'm not going to waste it, even though I didn't mean for it to be so close to the stevia. I'm going to harvest it soon and use it in my cooking. Next, I'll show you some of the seed I did keep and how it is I wish to plant it where I want it to grow. Here I've dug a small furrow for where I actually wish to plant more of the spinach. These seeds were once the bright purple berry-like fruit from last year's variety of spinach, and I collected them from the plants that I let remain at the end of the season to go into flower and produce the fruit, which then became seed. I can pluck them and let them dry on a plate inside, or just let them dry on the vine and fall right to the ground where they were last planted. Now, I do know that I'm always sharing with the birds. They may want the seeds as much as insects or worms. I'm rather unceremonious about it. I sprinkle very generously into the furrow and then cover it just enough with the dirt. I will water this evening, and as I usually do in the early morning, where it's not too hot and the sun is not full on the plants. And it is best for your garden, a gentle sprinkling every early afternoon or early evening or early morning. Now, I do have this tomato cage right here where I first planted my seed. And I want you to know that I did this because this variety does require a place to vine, or it will become a rather invasive ground cover that will choke all the other plants you have. The leaf and stem are edible, and it grows quickly. Lots to do, whether cooking or just using it in your salads. I did replace some plants since the February freeze with the help of stores, such as this basil. Basil is from the mint family, and this one is a really good example of an herb that is kept pruned, and so it is healthy and bushy and productive throughout the season. If I let this herb go into flower, it would signal to the plant that the growing season is at an end. And, well, it's just too early for that. Besides, when you let an herb go into flower, it does become bitter in taste, and the leaves not as tender or as beautifully deep green. Again, it signals that its time is at an end. Now, the leaves, as you can see, are bifurcated. That means that they grow 2 at a time. Let's trim this basil plant together. Here we have the first set of leaves. Here's another set, and a smaller set just starting here. When trimming the basil, you'll see that there are nodes, and as it grows, the distance between the nodes grows longer. So I see that this is 1, 2, here's the third node. Just above the third node, just like that, with a clean pair of scissors. Let's try that again. Here we see the first node, there's the second, and here's the third. Oh, and there's a fourth right underneath it, where you can see the leaves are growing 2 at a time. I'm going to cut just above the fourth node here. There we are. Basil is from the mint family, and it does have this wonderful, sweet, though peppery taste with a hint of anise. And it's great in salads, in fish dinners, and great in all kinds of dishes, such as spaghetti and meatballs. I can put this in sauces both red and white to complement any dinner. In fact, I think I'll be using this basil in my homemade spaghetti and meatballs recipe. And it looks like I'll have plenty left over for garnish. With the use of this safe drinking watering hose, I spend about 10 minutes before the sun has completely set and night has fallen to gently water the garden. It's a nice way to end the day. For more information on any of your springtime projects, visit mysapl.org or call 210-207-2500.